Continuing with the analysis, we will now discuss Chapter 3, Nordic Breakaway Civilization.
And this is a really dramatic shift in perspective for us. We're stepping completely away from the idea that UFOs are just extraterrestrials visiting.
Right, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH.
We're leaving that behind. Instead, we're going deep into a much, much more complex, and I think you could argue, a more disturbing theory.
Which is that the whole phenomenon, or at least a huge part of it involving a very specific type of being, is the product of a hidden elite right here on Earth.
A terrestrial elite, exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack that claim. This idea that a secret group with its roots in Northern European occultism, big industrial finance, and fascist ideology basically achieved a kind of technological transcendence.
It sounds like science fiction, but the theory is incredibly detailed.
It is. They supposedly developed time-warping tech, and now they're trying to position themselves as the future governors of humanity, all from some hidden hyperdimensional place. It completely flips the script on what we think aliens are.
It makes them our hostile, hyper-advanced human ancestors.
So to even begin to understand this breakaway civilization, we have to start with the architects, right? The beings at the center of it all.
We have to. And that brings us to the profile of the so-called Nordic ancestors.
If you go back to the very beginnings of modern ufology, I'm talking the 1950s, the early 60s, the classic alien wasn't the little gray guy.
Not at all.
The standard close encounter, the archetype, it almost always involved these tall, really imposing Northern European-looking people. They just call them the Nordics, or sometimes the tall whites.
And what's so striking when you look at the reports is just how consistent the descriptions are. Doesn't matter if this sighting was in Europe, America, South America, the description is almost always the same.
They're described as having a Northern European phenotype, tall, athletic, but not like bodybuilders.
No, lean, a kind of powerful, statuesque build.
The details about their faces are what really get me. Witnesses always talk about these very sharp, almost chiseled features, and this exceptionally broad and tall forehead that really stands out as a unique physical trait.
It suggests a kind of physiological development that's just beyond the normal human range.
And the height range is just. It's arresting. Reports put them anywhere from 5'6" to a staggering 9 feet tall.
But it's not just the height. Witnesses always bring up their arms, that they had exceptionally long arms and these very slender hands. The phrase that comes up again and again is the hands of pianists.
And I think the most memorable detail from all these old reports is how they moved. They didn't just walk.
No, it was something else.
People described it as majestic, elegant, and rhythmical gait. It suggests a kind of profound physical grace and control.
And that physical refinement is the absolute key, because here comes the central explosive idea of this entire theory.
Here it is.
These beings are explicitly described as not being extraterrestrials. They are not from another planet.
They're our own human ancestors.
Yes, but ancestors defined by technology from the future. The theory frames them as time travelers, coming from what the source calls the event horizon of the technological singularity.
That future point where technology just goes vertical, it grows exponentially and changes what it even means to be human.
When you have technology that gives you complete mastery over genetics, over aging, over space-time itself, you stop being human in the way we understand it. You become something else.
You become, as the theory puts it, a statuesque master race.
And here's the really dark part of that. The implication is that this elite, having mastered their own evolution, then went back and genetically engineered the rest of us, terrestrial humanity.
To be a slave race.
Specifically to serve as a slave race.
So from the very beginning, human civilization was basically a managed project, a farm. And if they're time travelers, it explains so much about our ancient myths.
Of course. Imagine you're living in an ancient civilization. You have no context for this kind of technology. And these beings show up in advanced craft, displaying what look like magical powers.
You call them gods or titans. It recontextualizes every single myth about divine beings descending from the sky.
Precisely. The core message here is that the so-called alien problem is actually an internal human problem that spans millennia and even dimensions.
Okay, so if the Nordics are the true masters, the ones at the top of the pyramid, where do the other famous players fit in? What about the Greys and the reptilians? They're the ones usually associated with the abductions.
The theory is very, very specific about this. It says the reptilians and most of the Greys are not independent alien species.
They're what then?
They're the manufactured workforce of the Nordic elite, biological robots, or genetic chimera purpose-built to do certain jobs.
So all the terrifying stuff we hear about in abduction stories, the cold medical exams, the implants, the mutilations, that's just the dirty work.
It's delegated to the proxies. The source material gets even more specific and more unsettling about the Greys.
I remember this part. It's pretty horrifying.
It is. The analysis claims that the Greys are specifically modified human fetuses, genetically engineered to be disposable, compliant, and totally emotionless.
Just operatives?
Exactly. And the purpose for using them is twofold. First, it's to perform tasks the Nordic elite considers beneath them. And second, and this is crucial, it's to maintain a falsely benevolent image of the Nordics themselves.
It's a psychological operation, a long-term one. So if the Nordics ever decide to reveal themselves to the world,
they can step forward and point to the Greys and say, "We are here to protect you from these monsters."
and they're immediately positioned as saviors, while hiding the fact that they're the puppet masters who created the monsters in the first place.
It's a brilliant, terrifyingly calculated strategy. It shows that this breakaway civilization is built on 3 pillars: advanced genetic engineering, mastery of time, and profound psychological deception.
So to understand how they built all this, we have to follow the money and the dark ideology that powered the whole thing from the start.
Exactly. We have to go back to the 19th century.
So we have this profile of the ancestors. Now let's trace the actual, terrestrial group that made this possible. This means connecting some pretty disparate threads, 19th century esoteric beliefs and 20th century industrial finance.
And we have to start with the foundational obsession of this Northern European elite, the concept of vril and the coming race. This wasn't just a tech project for them. It was deeply, deeply rooted in occultism and secret societies.
Right, vril. Most people know the term from that old 1871 novel, Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. It was about a hidden subterranean race with this incredible energy source. But for this real-world elite, what was vril, practically?
For them, vril was the real-world energy source they needed for their inventions. It was zero-point energy, or ZPE, what people back then called etheric energy, limitless power from the vacuum of space.
But the belief wasn't just about a new battery, was it?
Not at all. The core belief was that harnessing vril wasn't just a physical achievement, it was a spiritual catalyst. They truly believed that mastering it would trigger the arrival of a coming race, their own transformation into superhuman masters of the earth.
That kind of ambition needs a lot of capital, and that's where Nikola Tesla and J.P. Morgan come into the story.
Exactly. Tesla was already working in this exact area. He was experimenting with etheric power, and he was designing these incredible airships that sound a lot like modern UAP craft with no visible propulsion.
He was on the verge of free energy. And he found a backer in J.P. Morgan who, according to this theory, was already deeply involved with this intercontinental group of financiers and occultists, the very beginnings of the breakaway group.
And that partnership was, as we know, a total disaster for Tesla.
Morgan famously pulled his funding. But the theory claims it was more than that he deliberately defunded Tesla after stealing his designs for ZPE and for the airships.
It was a targeted high-stakes theft. The goal was to seize this world-changing technology and make sure it stayed under their complete monopolistic control. You can't have free energy if you're in the business of selling energy.
So Morgan didn't just push Tesla aside. He took those stolen designs and folded them into his own secret parallel engineering projects.
And these craft were built. They became the first generation of these mystery airships. The theft from Tesla was what ensured this limitless power source stayed proprietary, locked away from the public, and secured the power of this financial elite.
Okay, so now they have this secret proprietary project. They need a way to protect it, especially with all the political instability of the early 20th century. Communism is on the rise, which is a direct threat to this whole aristocratic industrialist structure.
Their response was strategic, and it was brutal. This vril-obsessed society, according to the source, went on to establish and finance European fascism, especially Nazism, as a political front.
A front.
A political bulwark, a shield to protect their secret etheric technology project.
That's a huge claim. The industrialists would basically fund a global catastrophe just to protect a few patents. What was the risk calculation there?
It's presented as pure, cold self-interest. J.P. Morgan was apparently instrumental in financing the rise of these regimes, but he wasn't the only one. The sources point directly at John D. Rockefeller, the oil titan.
And his motive would be obvious.
Completely explicit, to prevent freely available etheric energy from ever replacing his incredibly profitable fossil fuels.
So we're talking about a whole constellation of top-tier American corporations, Rockefeller, Ford Motors, IBM actively funding Nazi Germany. They saw it as the ultimate security guard for their business model and their secret tech against the threat of communism and free energy.
And that financial alignment went hand in hand with an ideological one. Social engineering. They needed to breed a master race worthy of controlling this godlike technology.
This is where eugenics comes in.
Elitists like the Rockefellers were at the forefront of the eugenics research movement in America, especially in California. The goal was cold and scientific. Engineer a perfect Nordic master race.
And it was a two-pronged approach, wasn't it?
It was. One track was the sterilization and elimination of what they call the undesirable population. The other track was the selective breeding of a perfect Nordic core through controlled insemination. A future utopia populated only by the brilliant and beautiful.
And Adolf Hitler was watching all of this.
He was an avid admirer of the American eugenics programs. He replicated them on a massive scale. And in this context, Nazi Germany basically becomes the Frankenstein's laboratory for this international Nordic elite, a place to accelerate the creation of the perfect genetic vessel for their technology.
So you have this direct line. Occult belief, industrial greed, the financing of fascism, and state-sponsored eugenics. That's the foundation of the breakaway civilization.
That's the foundation.
Okay, we've laid out the political and financial shield, this fascist movement that was protecting the elite. But a shield only protects something valuable. What was the actual revolutionary tech they were willing to risk a world war to keep secret?
That brings us to the core of it all. Zero-point energy, ZPE.
This is the bedrock of their propulsion system, but according to this theory, its importance goes way beyond just making a ship fly.
Far beyond. ZPE is usually explained as tapping the energy of the vacuum, but its real power is much more fundamental. It allows you to manipulate space-time itself.
And that ability is the master key to the entire UFO enigma.
Because if you can master space-time, you can master time travel.
We're talking about the absolute peak of technological development, right?
Mm-hmm.
The technological singularity. How does mastering ZPE get them out of the four-dimensional space-time that we live in?
Mastering ZPE is the singularity in this context. It lets them warp the very metric of space-time, which means they can literally transcend our four-dimensional existence and start operating in a fifth-dimensional hyperspace.
Okay, so think of our reality. 3 dimensions of space plus time as like a flat piece of paper.
Right. ZPE technology gives them the ability to fold that paper. They can bring any 2 points, in space or in time, together. It reduces distance and duration to 0.
So operating in hyperspace means they have immediate access to the entire timeline. They can go to the future, grab future technology, and bring it back, which would accelerate their own development exponentially.
Precisely. It ensures their technological superiority is always absolute. They aren't just visiting history, they're warping the fabric of reality to suit their needs. And this leap brings us directly to a very real, very sinister, classified Nazi program, Project Kronos.
The name itself tells you everything. Kronos, the Greek lord of time. The SS scientists knew exactly what they were trying to do.
This wasn't just research. This was an attempt to actually rupture reality. And the device they used was the infamous Nazi bell.
Tell us about the bell. This happened in Nazi-occupied Prague in 1944.
It was a massive bell-shaped device, and its specific, audacious goal was to intentionally rupture the space-time continuum. Powered by ZPE principles, the bell was designed to be a time-warping engine.
And the tests. The results were deeply disturbing. They showed just how powerful and dangerous this technology was.
The device was huge. It had to be chained down in a special rig. When they turned it on, it would levitate rapidly, surrounded by this intense bluish-purple glow. But the most terrifying effect was what it did to organic matter.
Plants placed near it would just decay.
They'd suffer rapid cellular degeneration. They literally decomposed in moments, collapsing from the inside out. It suggests time or space was being catastrophically warped at a cellular level.
And it wasn't just plants. The source material is very clear that they used human subjects to test this, concentration camp inmates.
It's the ultimate expression of that master race philosophy, complete dehumanization. The scientists who survived the first tests also reported that time itself felt distorted inside the lab. It felt like it was flowing at a different rate. They had confirmed they could locally manipulate the time continuum.
So the breakaway civilization now had the key. not just to escape Earth, but to fundamentally change their relationship with history itself.
Right. So even as the war was raging and the fascist front was about to collapse, this technological elite had already won their real prize.
The breakaway event is dated to 1945. It happens right as the world is seeing this public illusion of fascism's defeat.
While the world was celebrating, this intercontinental Nordic elite who had been flying these mystery airships for decades, they just opted out. They chose to break away from the surface world completely. They took their ZPE tech and became a full-fledged hidden breakaway civilization.
And they started moving their key assets, personnel, materials, and that horrifying Project Kronos Bell to safe locations.
Primarily to Argentina, under the friendly government of President Juan Perón.
Argentina was a safe haven, a Spanish fascist ally, perfect for continuing this kind of top-secret research without any oversight.
And they immediately started weaponizing their new technology, but as a psychological tool. The source mentions that in 1947, General Franco's Spain, the only fascist regime to survive the war, started launching saucer-shaped rockets across the Atlantic into U.S. airspace.
1947. That's the same year as the Kenneth Arnold sighting, which is what coined the term flying saucer and kicked off the modern UFO craze.
That's not a coincidence, according to this theory. The whole thing, the public hysteria, the massive U.S. government reaction that led to the creation of the CIA, the NSA, the entire national security state, it was a deliberate psychological operation.
Orchestrated by whom?
By the Nordic elite. Led by figures like Otto Skorzeny, the SS chief of special operations, a master of what they called Weltanschauungskrieg worldview warfare. He had personally seen the Bell fly. He was reportedly on the coast of Spain directing these launches.
So what was the goal?
Twofold. First, to publicly test their new craft in a deniable way. And second, to force the U.S. government to build a massive, secretive, compartmentalized intelligence apparatus.
An apparatus which the Nordic elite had already penetrated through former Nazi scientists brought over in Project Paperclip.
Exactly. They attacked the host and infiltrated it at the same time, creating a permanent global layer of official secrecy to hide behind. It was genius.
So with their technology secure and their hidden bases established, and we're talking about extensive underwater and underground bases here, the breakaway civilization moves into a new phase.
A more subtle long-term strategy. This is where the sophisticated psychological warfare really begins, and it starts with the contactee phenomenon.
The 1950s and 60s contactees, people like George Adamski, George Van Tassel, and later on Billy Meyer, their stories are all remarkably similar.
Unusually consistent. They all claim to be in contact with these Nordics, these space brothers, who were a benevolent, spiritual, peaceful elder race, and they were here to offer humanity guidance.
Given the origins we've just discussed, that narrative sounds suspicious.
The analysis concludes that these contactees were specifically tasked with presenting a manufactured, falsely benevolent image of the Nordics. The source suggests many of them were either compromised, ideologically aligned with the cause, or were even witting agents in the operation.
And when you look into their backgrounds, you find some weird connections. Van Tassel, for instance, he acquired the semi-subterranean home of suspected Nazi spy right after the spy was killed.
And Billy Meyer, who claimed contact with Nordics from the Pleiades, he had a past running around the Middle East at the exact time the Odessa network, the escape route for high-ranking Nazis, was most active there. The connections are there if you look.
So this whole Space Brothers narrative, it's designed to prime the public for a future scenario, isn't it?
It is. The theory is that if a full disclosure event is ever forced upon them, the breakaway civilization is ready to step forward and present themselves as our saviors, the ones who will protect us from the truly evil aliens, the Greys, and the reptilians.
But that's the ultimate lie.
It's the ultimate lie because, as we established, the Greys are just their biological robots.
The evidence from abduction cases, not contactee cases, paints a very different picture of the Nordics.
A much darker one. It indicates the Nordics are as sadistic as any of the so-called Greys. They just delegate the dirty work, the abductions, the implants, the mutilations to their biorobots. It keeps their own hands publicly clean.
So they are the masters behind all the atrocities. And if you want a blueprint for the kind of society these Nordic masters actually built for themselves, the source points to the Umo case.
Ah, the Umites. This was an incredible case out of 1950s Italy. Contactees started receiving these incredibly detailed documents, supposedly describing a society that sounds like the perfect expression of the Nordic master race ideology.
What did it describe?
The Umites detailed a society with a completely centralized government. There was no private enterprise, no personal property. Every single person is essentially an employee of the state, all for the goal of social stability and genetic perfection.
And their social engineering was total, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when it came to reproduction. It sounds like a direct line from those early eugenics programs.
It's the ultimate realization of that eugenicist dream. Their lifespans are measured in centuries, but their reproduction is entirely controlled by the state. Children are conceived only through artificial insemination to guarantee genetic improvement. It removes all random chance from the gene pool.
A self-perpetuating, genetically superior ruling class.
Exactly. And the physical evidence for this society points to a massive hidden infrastructure here on Earth.
The Ummites asked the contactees to deliver resources, right?
Yes, that's a crucial detail. They asked for huge amounts of supplies, large quantities of fruit, which could be for feeding a large population or for some kind of biological research, and rare elements like strontium, which is used in nuclear engineering.
And they paid in platinum.
They paid in platinum. This all strongly suggests they're maintaining huge, resource-intensive underground and undersea bases. One was allegedly located stretching all the way under central Italy.
So the ultimate proof of their reach isn't just hidden bases or biorobots. It's their ability to penetrate the highest levels of human government. And that brings us to the case of Sir Peter Horsley.
A truly unsettling case. It's 1954, London. Horsley is a high-ranking official in the British state, and he's approached by two Nordics operating incognito. A Mrs. Markham and a man who deliberately calls himself Mr. Janus.
Janus, the two-faced god. He's not exactly hiding the deception.
Not at all. And they get access to Horsley through high-level British security contacts, which suggests the breakaway civilization already had deep hooks into the UK's intelligence and aristocratic circles.
What did they want?
They wanted to talk about global policy, nuclear disarmament specifically. But the really chilling moment came when Mr. Janus demonstrated this profound, specific knowledge of all Britain's top-secret nuclear secrets. Horsley was shaken because there's no way he should have known that information.
But the story gets much, much stranger when you look at Horsley's career path after this meeting.
It does. By 1973, he's risen to become Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the British Strike Command. During the Cold War, he's the man with his finger on the nuclear button.
And the time travel implication here is impossible to ignore.
It's paramount. The theory suggests the Nordics, operating from the future, knew where Horsley's career was going decades in advance. Their meeting in 1954 wasn't just a chat. It was an attempt to influence a key future nuclear decision-maker at the very start of his career.
To shape his worldview so it would be aligned with theirs when he finally got power.
And when Horsley got suspicious and started an MI5 investigation, what happened?
Markham and Janus just vanished. Instantly.
Which shows their infiltration was surgical and temporary, designed purely to manipulate key nodes of power and then disappear without a trace.
So beyond the technology, beyond the infiltration, the real power of this breakaway civilization is a kind of philosophical weapon.
It is their ultimate weapon. The source calls it the concept of a destructive departure in worldview warfare.
That sounds incredibly dense. But it seems fundamental to how they maintain control. It's about fighting a war on the level of perception itself.
It's about consciously deconstructing existing societies from the inside out. The German terminology is Abbauender Aufbruch im Weltanschauungskrieg. It's a mouthful, but breaking it down is the key to their entire strategy.
Okay, let's start with the revolutionary part. Aufbruch.
Aufbruch means breakthrough or departure. It represents a non-incremental, radically revolutionary, leap-like mastering time travel that allows for a complete breakout from normal human existence. It's the technological leap that lets them literally exit our history.
And the destructive part, the part aimed at us, is Abo.
Abo means dismantling or deconstruction. It's a concept with roots in thinkers like Nietzsche and Heidegger. It means the conscious, strategic unbuilding of the belief systems, the ideologies, the paradigms that the rest of humanity still blindly follows.
So if you're trapped by a political or economic ideology, they see you as predictable, manageable.
Easily managed. So putting it all together, Abbauender Aufbruch im Weltanschauungskrieg is a dismantling breakthrough in worldview warfare.
It's a full-spectrum cognitive war. While they are ascending and breaking away, they are actively working to ensure the rest of us descend into confusion and chaos.
Precisely. They are masters of reality management. By consciously deconstructing these paradigms themselves, by freeing themselves from the ideologies that still trap the rest of us, they gain a unique hyperdimensional advantage.
How does that translate into actual control?
By understanding and dismantling the paradigms that govern a society, they increase what the source calls their latitude of control. They enhance their own vital force, their ability to act, because they're not bound by the rules we operate under.
They see themselves as conscious combatants in a war of worldviews, and they can dominate us because we don't even know we're on the battlefield.
Exactly. This means they aren't just fighting with ships in space. They're fighting to define reality itself. It's a hyperdimensional conquest. Every piece of strange propaganda, every seemingly random political shift, every bizarre UFO story could be a calculated move in this philosophical war.
And since they're operating from outside our timeline, they're playing a game that we can't even perceive, let alone win.
It solidifies their position as the future governors of a conquered humanity, using this philosophical weapon to ensure their dominance is perpetual.
So this deep dive has really laid out an incredible theory. We've traced the Nordic breakaway civilization from its roots in 19th century occultism through massive industrial finance and the sponsorship of Nazi eugenics and technology, all the way to a hyperdimensional time-traveling master race.
We've looked at how they use proxies like the Greys, how they orchestrate massive psychological warfare campaigns like the contactee deception, and how they use this devastating philosophical weapon of worldview warfare to shape our very reality.
We have meticulously examined the origin and ideology of the Nordic breakaway civilization.
Next, we will continue our analysis by turning to the section of the book that explores their most defining achievement, Chapter 4, Machinations in the Matrix of Time, to understand in detail how the ability to travel through time fundamentally alters the nature of our reality and history itself. Continuing with the analysis, we will now discuss Chapter 4, which is titled Machinations in the Matrix of Time.
And this is really where things take a sharp turn.
Yeah, to say the least. This chapter is, without any exaggeration, where the analysis of the UFO phenomenon goes completely off the rails of conventional thinking. We are moving way beyond the standard discussion of, intergalactic spaceships and little green men.
Oh, absolutely.
We're diving into a hypothesis so radical it basically requires us to rethink physics, history, and our very place in the cosmos. The core assertion here is that these craft we see, they're not alien visitors.
No, they're time machines.
Hyper-advanced time machines wielded by a hidden terrestrial-based civilization that has already, according to this, achieved the technological singularity.
That's the critical pivot. We are being asked to accept that the most sophisticated technology on, or I guess under Earth, is designed not for space travel, but for chronal manipulation, for time manipulation. The sources are arguing that this breakaway civilization, this hidden society that's sort of splintered off, has mastered space-time and is now actively working to manipulate or stabilize the historical timeline.
For their own survival.
Their own survival, yes.
And the symbolic starting point for this whole idea is incredibly dark. It immediately frames the stakes. The source material kicks off by referencing the Nazi program, Project Kronos.
Exactly. And the name is everything. Kronos is the Greek personification of time, this primordial, infinite, and, destructive force.
The Lord of Time.
The Lord of Time. So naming your most secret program that isn't just a cool code name, it's a profound statement of intent.
It shifts the whole conflict. It's not a geopolitical battle over land or oil anymore.
No, it's a hyperdimensional war for mastery over the space-time matrix itself. It suggests that from the very beginning, these attempts were aimed at bending the rules of the universe, not just building a better V2 rocket.
So let's tie this directly into the idea of the technological singularity. We usually think of it as the moment AI gets smarter than us and everything goes wild.
Right, that's the common definition.
But the authors here argue that the actual apex of the singularity, the single technology that makes it all possible, is mastering time travel through zero-point energy ZPE.
And what's fascinating here is that ZPE isn't just treated as a clean, infinite energy source, which is how we usually talk about it.
Right, like for powering our cities.
Exactly. Here it's presented as the literal key to the fifth dimension. The idea is that once a civilization can build electrogravitic tech that's powerful enough to tap into ZPE, the vacuum energy of space itself, that provides the sheer energy density you need to warp the four-dimensional fabric of space-time.
Okay, but that's a huge leap for most people. How does harnessing an energy source suddenly let you jump into another dimension?
Well, think of it this way. Our reality has 3 spatial dimensions, plus time. When you harness ZPE, the gravitational manipulation you can achieve is immense. It acts as both a massive energy source and sink at the same time.
Okay.
This lets you bend local space-time so extremely that you create a controllable miniature event horizon, like a tiny black hole you can steer. This torsion, this twisting of space-time, it gives you a reference point outside of our linear timeline,
Which is the fifth dimension.
which is what we're calling a fifth-dimensional hyperspace.
Yeah.
If you could do that, you can access the past and future freely, and that just accelerates every other technology exponentially. This is the moment, the authors argue, that the breakaway civilization truly left us behind.
Okay, let's unpack this with some history, going back to the source materials, very dark origins, the Nazi pressure.
Yeah, we have to talk about the legendary, but apparently very well documented Nazi Bell device.
Right.
Die Glock. The descriptions we have point to this acorn-shaped electrogravitic machine. It was tested under extreme secrecy in Prague in 1944. And its first code name is incredibly revealing. Project Tor.
Tor, meaning gate, or portal project.
Precisely. That's way more telling than Project Tiger Tank or something.
Mm-hmm.
The core function, right from the start, wasn't about weapons. It was about rupturing the space-time continuum.
And they later renamed it Project Kronos, which just hammers the point home.
It cements the goal. The physics behind it involved these counter-rotating cylinders filled with some mysterious red mercury-like substance. This setup, researchers suggest, was the crude beginning of generating the extreme fields needed for ZPE manipulation.
The details from those early tests they're not just alarming, they're catastrophic. It sounds like they were dealing with forces they just could not control.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't an engineering failure. It was a horrifying encounter with non-conventional physics. We have records of the tests having these awful effects on organic matter.
Like what?
Any biological material placed near the bell plants, animal tissue, it experienced immediate and violent cellular degeneration. It just collapsed from within. It suggests exposure to extreme spatiotemporal stress or some unknown radiation that was like rapidly aging it.
And the human scientists, they weren't immune.
No. The human cost was extremely high. The first group of scientists on the project experienced this profound, debilitating distortion in the flow of time inside the lab.
Time dilation.
Yes, feeling as if time was moving at a completely different rate. This exposure led to a number of them dying very quickly from organ failure. It points to some kind of acceleration of their internal biology, maybe premature aging or just total systemic collapse from the temporal stress.
And we have to mention, as unpleasant as it is, that the Nazi regime reportedly used concentration camp inmates as test subjects right inside the Bell's enclosure.
And that detail, it just underscores the ruthlessness that was needed to forge this civilization. This technology was born from just immense human rights violations and an ideology that placed zero value on human life. They were testing hyperdimensional physics on living people to fast-track development.
So this brutal history brings us to a really compelling piece of physical evidence, the Kecksburg incident in 1965. Why do the sources connect this famous UFO crash in Pennsylvania with the Nazi Bell?
It's the striking physical resemblance. Witnesses and recovered accounts of the Kecksburg UFO described it as acorn or bell-shaped, about 10 to 12 feet tall, and it had these strange hieroglyphic-like markings around a band at the base.
Which is a near-perfect match for the Nazi Bell prototypes.
An almost one-to-one match. So the theory is that the Kecksburg object wasn't an alien ship that crashed in '65.
It was a time-traveling relic.
Precisely. The authors hypothesized it was a later model of the Bell that time-traveled from the late 1940s. Maybe it malfunctioned or was on a mission, ended up in 1965.
And this lines up with eyewitness accounts from the camps.
It does. It aligns perfectly with reports from inmates who described seeing the Bell, they called it the barrel, levitate silently into the night sky with this distinct bluish-white glow. And that blue glow is exactly the kind of anomalous light we hear about in UFO sightings involving silent, rapid movement.
So it implies this dangerous early ZPE tech was not only viable, but still being used decades later. That just fundamentally changes the question from where are they from to
when are they from?
Exactly.
And that leads directly to the core demographic hypothesis the researchers put forward. The UFO occupants are not aliens. They're time travelers. They're future humans.
Yeah.
Specifically, the beings often described as the NORDICs.
The tall, statuesque, Northern European-looking figures.
Yes, and this is where the breakaway civilization concept becomes really unsettling. The sources suggest these NORDICs are our own human ancestors, but from the far, far future, from the other side of the technological singularity.
So they achieved this advanced tech millions of years ago, potentially.
That's the assertion, yeah.
Yeah.
And that they used it to genetically engineer early humanity They're positioned as the gods or titans from our ancient myths, creating us as a form of slave labor or a biological asset in the deep past.
Okay, so where do the other classic abduction figures fit in? The Greys, the Reptilians?
In this framework, they get a major demotion. They're not independent species. The Greys are seen as genetic chimeras, biological automatons designed by this Nordic master race to do the dirty work abductions, mutilations.
They're just robots.
Or just robots, yeah. And the Reptilians are similarly reduced to a kind of secondary engineered slave race. The key point is that the craft aren't coming from other star systems. They're coming from massive submarine and underground bases right here on Earth.
Or the Moon and Mars.
Or installations on the Moon and Mars, which the sources claim were inhabited or engineered by these Nordic ancestors long, long ago.
So it reframes the whole thing as an internal Earth problem, just a very chronologically complicated one. Okay, let's get technical again. If these are time machines, how do they work? What does a craft have to do to warp space-time?
The physics is very specific, and it requires a particular mechanical action. This is why researchers argue that the classic UFO shapes, the disk, the cylinder, the ring, they're not just aesthetic choices, they are fundamental engineering requirements.
And what do those shapes facilitate?
They facilitate the rapid controlled rotation of an extremely dense, highly massive, or energetically charged body inside the craft's core. And that rotation is critical because it induces a phenomenon from general relativity called frame dragging.
Right, frame dragging, the warping of space-time from a rotating massive object.
Yeah.
But we're talking about creating a controlled singularity here.
Exactly. When you rotate something massive or energetic enough at these insane speeds, it literally drags space-time around with it. To travel through time, the rotation has to be so extreme that it creates a controlled spatiotemporal vortex. It mimics the conditions near a black hole's event horizon.
This is superkinetic physics.
That's the term, yes. And the goal isn't just bending space, it's about bending time. By achieving this extreme frame dragging, the craft's energy field can manipulate light cones, the paths that causality follows.
Reorienting them toward the past.
It reorients future light cones toward the past, allowing them to pick a new temporal coordinate. This sustained high-energy torsion is why the craft often have that glowing edge or ring. It's the visual effect of the rotation needed to make the craft a self-contained temporal gateway.
Which also gives a plausible scientific reason for all the weird visual stuff associated with UFOs.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
When a craft is operating like this, the huge energy output would cause things like the blue shift that's so often reported.
Why blue shift specifically?
Well, blue shift happens when light gets compressed because of high velocity towards you. If the craft is compressing space in front of it and expanding it behind, like a theoretical warp drive, the light from it would appear shifted towards the blue end of the spectrum.
Even if it's not actually moving that fast in our space.
Right, and the most dramatic part, the instantaneous appearance or disappearance. That's not a question of speed at all. It's a question of dimension.
They're not moving impossibly fast within our 4 dimensions.
No, they're just moving out of phase with our 4D time frame. From their perspective, they have a constant reference point in the 5D hyperspace, and they're just dipping into our continuum 1965, 2024, whatever, to do something, then snapping back out. Their vanishing act is just them switching dimensional reference points.
Which brings up the most important question. Why? Why are these superior future humans visiting us? The classic abduction story is all about a hybridization project. How does this source material refine that motive?
The standard story is they need our DNA. But the reason they need it is the twist here. The speculation is that their advanced genetic engineering, which the sources tie right back to those original Nazi-style eugenics policies, led to a catastrophic evolutionary failure.
They engineered themselves into a dead end.
Yes. They achieved a state of genetic homogeneity, a gene pool that's dangerously narrow and uniform. This lack of diversity makes them incredibly vulnerable to new diseases or genetic disorders. It threatens their whole species.
They perfected themselves right out of survival.
Pretty much. So the hybridization project is an extreme chronological emergency rescue mission. It's an act of genetic desperation.
And since there are human ancestors, interbreeding is biologically possible.
Right. They're using time travel not to conquer us, but to desperately rediversify their own species by interacting with us, their less engineered ancestors. It makes the whole thing a massive, costly survival imperative, all driven by their own civilization's past mistakes.
But wait, if they're constantly coming back to change things, that means they can change history. Doesn't mainstream physics say that's impossible?
And this is where we run headfirst into one of the biggest philosophical hurdles in physics. the nature of time. Mainstream physics mostly holds to the idea of the block universe, often defended by something called the Novikov self-consistency principle.
Which is the idea that all of time past, present, future, it all exists at once, like a fixed block, like frames on a film strip.
Exactly. And in that fixed view, everything is predetermined. If you travel to the past, the universe basically forces you into a loop that ensures your actions are consistent with what already happened. The past can't be changed, so paradoxes are impossible.
And the consequence of that is no free will. If every choice you ever make is already written into the cosmos, agency is just an illusion, and then you have the paradox problem.
The self-plagiarizing thesis is the classic one. You get a copy of your future self's paper. You never write it, but your future self never wrote it either because they got it from their past self. It's an information loop that creates something from nothing. It's a logical mess.
Then you have the many worlds interpretation, which says you just jump to a parallel universe, but that still doesn't affect our history.
Right. You go back and deal with Hitler, but you've only changed one of infinite parallel timelines. Ours is untouched. So the time traveler still has no real agency over our history.
The source material here rejects both of those ideas and proposes something called the matrix reprogramming thesis.
This thesis totally redefines the cosmos. It argues the universe isn't some fixed physical thing, but a vast quantum computational information processing system. Not necessarily a simulation run by an outside intelligence, but that the fabric of reality itself is computational.
Like a giant video game constantly rendering itself.
A good analogy. And in this framework, UFOs are explicitly called matrix reprogramming devices. This system, the thesis suggests, must store all past states of play in a kind of cosmic archive. This is what mystics might have called the Akashic record. The information is there, but it's not fixed. It's not immutable, like in the block universe.
And the crucial implication, the only way their motive makes sense, is that time travel does change our past.
It makes time travel profoundly dangerous and consequential. If the past is revisable, then the actions of these time travelers, fixing their genes, rewriting events, have real, maybe catastrophic effects on our present reality. They're literally fighting to master the narrative of a cosmic game by altering the historical source code.
And the tangible proof that our timeline has been changed is something millions of people are experiencing, the Mandela effect.
This is the most compelling non-technical evidence for the matrix reprogramming thesis. It's this phenomenon where huge groups of people share these very precise collective memories of an alternate past that is verifiably wrong in our current timeline.
What are some of the big examples beyond Nelson Mandela himself?
Well, the namesake is the memory of Mandela dying in prison in the 80s or 90s, with people remembering news reports and funerals decades before he actually died in 2013.
Yeah, right.
But there are others. The kids' books, the Berenstain Bears. Millions of people vividly remember it spelled Berenstein, but the record shows it's always been Berenstain. Or the Monopoly Man.
Ooh, monocle.
Everyone remembers him with a monocle, but if you look at the game, the art, he's never had one.
So the shared verifiable discrepancy is interpreted as what, exactly?
As a glitch in the matrix. The idea is that people experiencing the Mandela effect aren't just misremembering. They're intuitively sensing a timeline shift. They're momentarily accessing those archived past states of play, the Akashic record, before the quantum computational cosmos fully overwrites it. The residual memory of the old timeline is the proof that someone has been editing the cosmic source code.
The implications are just, as you said, mind-bending. If this hidden civilization is actively rewriting history, they can't be working out of, a lab in the desert. They must have incredibly secure, undetectable, permanent bases right here on Earth to do this stuff.
The need for hidden terrestrial bases is paramount if you're running a temporal war. And if their technology warps space-time with ZPE, the bases themselves should be detectable by, well, strange hyperdimensional signatures.
Before we jump into those signatures, it's worth grounding ourselves in what the conventional U.S. government alone has been capable of. It really sets the stage for what a time-traveling civilization could pull off.
Absolutely. The sources detail documented U.S. government plans for the 60s and 70s for these massive, deep underground facilities. A network so vast it sounds like science fiction. We're talking about bases thousands of feet under mountains designed to be invulnerable to a direct nuclear hit.
And not just isolated bunkers, but an interconnected network.
Yes. The plans called for these bases to be linked by a huge subterranean maglev train system. Over 2,000 miles of tunnels, moving people and materials across the country, completely separate from the surface. They'd be self-sustaining, powered by their own nuclear reactors. a world below our world.
And communication. How do you talk through that much rock?
With extremely low frequency, or ELF, waves. ELF waves can penetrate massive amounts of rock and water, so you're communicating through the Earth itself, not the atmosphere. The whole thing was designed to be totally independent of the surface.
And the tunneling technology to build this network. That's maybe the most incredible and stealthy part, the nuclear submarines.
This tech is critical because it solves the problem of how you excavate millions of tons of rock without anyone noticing. The patents for these machines from the 1970s describe these large cylindrical devices that melt their way through rock.
They don't drill, they melt.
Correct. The front of the cylinder is heated to hundreds of degrees by a small nuclear reactor, melting the rock. As the machine moves forward, it pushes the molten rock out to the sides of the tunnel, where it cools and solidifies almost instantly. This leaves behind a perfectly smooth, glassy, vitrified tunnel wall.
That is the ultimate stealth construction. No dirt piles on the surface, and the tunnels are smooth, round, and self-supporting.
And it wasn't just limited to land. A 1966 U.S. Navy project, Rock Site, looked at building installations 10,000 feet deep beneath the continental shelves. The reports of the technology needed for it was basically off the shelf.
And here's the truly incredible part of that Navy report.
Yes, the abstract of that 1966 report had a stunning admission. It stated that large installations built into the continental shelf had already been operating for many decades before 1966.
Wow.
So if the conventional government could do that before the mid-60s, imagine what a breakaway civilization with ZPE and time travel tech could achieve. The existence of vast, hidden, hyperdimensional bases becomes not just plausible, but likely.
And the evidence for these portals, these time tiers, is found in specific places. Bermuda triangles on land.
The most famous contemporary example is Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. The source material describes it as a known aperture, a place where a hyperdimensional portal periodically opens and closes, usually with UFO activity.
What makes them so sure it's a portal and not just a weird light?
Scientists on the ranch observed it up close. Sometimes it would manifest as a circular window in the air, and through it, you could see a different environment on the other side.
Like what?
There are documented cases of researchers seeing a daylight blue sky through the portal while it was pitch black night on the ranch. That's not a light effect, that's a tear connecting two different places or times.
And the connection to underground bases is pretty clear from the activity.
Absolutely. UFOs are often seen coming out of these vortices before disappearing into the nearby mountains. At the same time, researchers report hearing these incredibly loud, complex machinery sounds coming from deep underground. It strongly suggests a huge, hidden installation is down there, operating this technology.
Another infamous spot is Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the Mothman sightings.
Point Pleasant has the same high strangeness, the same consistent UFO activity, and critically, the same unexplained livestock mutilations you find at Skinwalker Ranch. The cryptid sightings, like Mothman, are thought to be a side effect. These creatures, maybe prehistoric, could be accidentally wandering through time tiers created by a hidden base in that region.
And these zones seem to be causing something far more tragic than just strange sightings. They're linked to some of the most bizarre missing persons cases ever recorded. This is where the time slip hypothesis becomes a potential human tragedy.
This connection comes from the research of David Paulides, a former law enforcement officer. He investigated over 1,000 missing persons cases that share this cluster of really bizarre characteristics, and they almost always happen near large granite boulders or bodies of water.
What are those key bizarre characteristics?
There are a few. First, specialized search and rescue dogs are completely unable to track the victim's scent. It just vanishes. Second, the remains are later found in areas that had already been searched meticulously multiple times.
And the third, the most chilling one.
The third is that victims often remove their clothes or shoes, even when they disappeared in freezing weather. And there's no sign of hypothermia-induced paradoxical undressing or animal attacks to explain it.
Let's use the Aaron Hedges case from 2014 to illustrate this.
Hedges was hunting in Montana and got lost. 2 days later, his boots were found, neatly placed side by side on the trail. He was missing for 9 months. When his remains were found 11 miles away, everyone was baffled. Why would a hunter take off his boots in the snow and walk 11 miles over sharp granite? It makes no sense.
So the time slip hypothesis offers the only explanation within this framework.
The argument is that Hedges slipped into a past-time continuum. In that past moment, the weather was warmer, maybe late summer, so he ditched his jacket and boots. The reason he wasn't found for 9 months is because he wasn't in our time until the moment he passed back into the present in a totally different location.
That's a profoundly disturbing idea. And it's not just about slipping into the deep past. The Haley-Ziga case from 2001 is a great example of this cross-temporal confusion.
Haley, an 8-year-old, disappeared while hiking. She was found alive 51 hours later. She said another girl had helped her while she was lost. The chilling part is that Haley's description of this girl perfectly matched the profile of a woman who had disappeared and died on that same trail 23 years earlier.
So the idea is Haley briefly met someone who, in our timeline, was already dead.
Precisely. Haley may have slipped 23 years into the past and met the woman when she was still alive, or maybe they both wound up in some non-contemporary time pocket. It just highlights the fluid, dangerous nature of these zones.
If people are being involuntarily sent into the deep past, there should be physical evidence, artifacts where they shouldn't be.
And that is exactly what researchers have documented, though these finds are usually dismissed by orthodox science. We have accounts of manufactured gold thread found embedded in solid stone, dating between 320 and 360 million years old, a time when life was mostly in the ocean.
Gold thread, a product of craftsmanship, millions of years before humans. What else?
There's a meticulously crafted gold chain found inside a lump of Carboniferous coal, which is 260 to 320 million years old. The ends of the chain were embedded in the coal, confirming it was part of the original formation. We also have reports of human skeletal remains from 286 to 320 million years ago recovered from Illinois coal beds.
But the fossilized footprints must be the most definitive proof.
The footwear evidence is damning for the conventional timeline. There's a fossilized shoe print from the Triassic period, 213 to 248 million years ago. Geologists analyzed it and confirmed details of the thread twist, proving it was a stitched shoe. Even older, a footprint discovered in 1968 shows a human-like form stepping right on trilobites from the Cambrian period, 505 to 590 million years ago.
500 million years ago. So these aren't ancient aliens. They're the tragic proof of people who suffered involuntary time slips into the unimaginably deep past.
Correct. They're the remnants of people like Aaron Hedges, caught in a temporal vortex and deposited in an era from which they could never return.
This new framework completely changes how we look at places like the Bermuda Triangle. What we thought was just bad weather is recast as the signature of a massive underwater base.
The Bermuda Triangle is proposed to be the most active spatiotemporal vortex on Earth, allegedly caused by extreme ZPE technology operating from a secret installation under the Great Bahama Bank. This base produces the gravitational torsion needed to create a time tear. The vortex itself is often invisible because we're looking for electromagnetic signs, but this is a gravitational phenomenon.
This explains the classic stories of ships found abandoned but perfectly intact.
Exactly. A ship found undamaged, table set for dinner, but the crew is gone and the lifeboats are missing.
Yeah.
It suggests they weren't violently abducted. They may have willingly entered an alluring or frightening time vortex that opened near them. They took the lifeboats to explore, and then the portal closed, leaving the ship behind.
And the most famous disappearance, Flight 19 in 1945. The 5 bombers that vanished. Their final communications are the most haunting evidence.
The radio calls from the flight leader, LTN Charles Taylor, are profoundly disturbing. He was a seasoned pilot, but he's saying, "We don't know which way is west. Everything is wrong. Strange. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should."
That's not just getting lost. If you're flying through a tear in space-time, traditional navigation is useless.
Exactly. His utter loss of direction and the ocean not looking right. It strongly suggests they were traversing a hyperdimensional space where physical laws were breaking down. The transmission cutting off abruptly is interpreted as the temporal portal closing behind them, trapping them forever.
The sources even suggest a chronological link between these land disappearances and Bermuda Triangle incidents.
Yes. Researchers have tracked dates where bizarre disappearances in, say, Colorado coincide chronologically with planes or ships vanishing in the triangle. This suggests a synchronized pattern of temporal disturbance. It implies that time travelers are actively using a network of hyperdimensional bases on land and under the sea to manipulate the space-time matrix.
So this chapter is a complete paradigm shift. We've established the 2 central claims. 1, UFOs are time machines, born from a dark technological history that culminates in mastering ZPE.
Right.
And 2, our cosmos is a revisable quantum computational system, a game board that can be rewritten.
And this idea that history isn't fixed, but fluid, it leads to the most terrifying implication of all.
Yeah.
It's not the grandfather paradox we should worry about.
It's the constant invisible danger of historical erasure.
Exactly. If this breakaway civilization is using its technology to rewrite the past for its own survival, to fix a genetic collapse or prevent a war, then our most cherished accomplishments, our memories, the very existence of certain people, can be retroactively erased.
They could be here today, and if the timeline is revised, gone tomorrow as if they never existed.
We have no assurance that our current timeline is the final stable version or just the current state of play in a cosmic game run by beings who see themselves as our masters, desperately trying to stabilize their future by messing with our past. It suggests reality itself is fleeting, a process subject to continuous revision.
A truly profound and unsettling thought to end on.
It really is. It underscores the stakes involved in mastering the matrix of time.
Next, we will move on to analyze other sections of this book, which delve deeper into the origins of the breakaway civilization and the religious dimensions of the close encounter phenomenon.